President Guaido, President Donald Trump asked me to be here today to deliver a simple message to you and to the people of Venezuela. Estamos con ustedes. We are with you, 100%.
That was U.S. Vice President Mike Pence speaking before a gathering of the Lima Group today in Colombia. He reaffirmed American support for self-declared Venezuelan President Juan Guaido. Pence also announced new U.S. sanctions targeting Venezuela's government. That measure follows a weekend fraught with violence and tension in Venezuela. The attempt to usher humanitarian aid past security forces and into the country ended with hundreds of injuries and at least 3 deaths. And it doesn't look like embattled President Nicolas Maduro is any closer to relinquishing power. But are sanctions really the path forward to unlocking the political stalemate gripping the country? What else can be done? Ben Rosewell is Canada's former ambassador to Venezuela, now president of the Canadian International Council. He joins us from Toronto. Hi, Mr. Rosewell. Nice to see you again. Thanks for your time.
Anytime, Vashi.
So Venezuela has been gripped by a political stalemate for weeks now. I think the last time we spoke to you was at the beginning of February. On Saturday, Juan Guaido was unable to get humanitarian aid past Maduro's military blockades at the border. How, in your view, if at all, can the Lima meeting today in Colombia break the deadlock, if at all possible?
So Latin America represents the near totality of Latin America taking a major crisis in Latin America into its own hands. And I think that just the fact that they're taking the lead is a really important part of this story. They have shown tremendous consistency in how they're approaching the democratic aspirations of Venezuelans. And in Bogota today, they're discussing what other measures, what other diplomatic and peaceful measures can be taken to hasten a return to the constitutional order in Venezuela, like individual sanctions against human rights abusers, like aligning some of the economic policies, and like thinking about some of the economic reconstruction that will need to take place once democracy has been returned to Venezuela.
Can I ask you to expand a little bit on what other tools are at their disposal? Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States, for example, mentioned sanctions like you just did today and sort of saying that more sanctions are necessary. What kinds of sanctions, do you think will be most effective, and what other tools can countries like the U.S., like Canada, et cetera, use to advance things?
So the kind of sanctions that Canada introduced in September 2017 are against individuals. They're not against the entire economy. They're not meant to punish regular Venezuelans. They're meant to hold senior levels of the military or security or intelligence services accountable for systematic human rights abuses. Those are the right kinds of sanctions to have in place against Venezuela, and those are the kinds of sanctions that other countries in Latin America are holding. Now, Canada was a bit of a norm entrepreneur, as it were. We were sort of forward-leaning in the introduction of this kind of legislation under the Magnitsky Act. It's now starting to take hold in Latin America. And to the extent that you're a senior general in the military in Venezuela and you're looking at whether you're going to stick with Maduro in spite of his massive unpopularity or back Juan Guaido in the National Assembly, and you're starting to think about your own options, and you're starting to find out that not only can you not ever go to Canada or the United States, but you're not going to be allowed to go to Peru, to Panama, to Colombia. That's going to start changing the individual calculus of senior supporters of Maduro. That's the kind of thing that I think is going to bring some change to Venezuela.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that and get your read. We saw, for example, just before the weekend, Juan Guaido issue a sort of ultimatum to people in the military because, of course, right now they're the ones who are blocking that aid at the direction of Maduro from getting in. And sort of the ultimatum was to switch sides. We saw only about 100, from everything I've read, defect. How do you read that? How do you interpret that? What does it say?
Well, what really struck me about the 100 soldiers that demonstrated their loyalty to the citizens of Venezuela this past weekend was how much risk they were taking to their lives when they did it. There's this one really dramatic image of a vehicle of Venezuelan soldiers literally like barreling towards the border just so that they can get as close as possible to Colombian territory before they jump out. You can see in those kinds of videos the incredible risks that they're taking, risks to their family back in Caracas as well. So if there's 100 people that are that desperate to take that significant a risk, just think of the other tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of soldiers that must be thinking the same thing. The difference is that the people that have made that decision are all in the rank and file, those that themselves are experiencing the massive malnutrition and the humanitarian problems. The generals at the top, who are extremely rich and benefiting from the regime, are the ones that have yet to be convinced. And that's where the individual measures that other Latin American countries are taking could make a difference.
Is sanctions the only way, are sanctions the only way to accomplish that, do you think?
No, you need to look at it in terms of incentives. So incentives can be either carrots or sticks. So individual punishments against human rights abusers is a carrot, but there's also is a stick, sorry. But on the carrot side, there's humanitarian assistance. Obviously, that's now been made quite visible that it's there and ready for the Venezuelan people to meet their needs the minute that they have a government that's responsive to their needs in power. But there's longer-term measures that I think could be taken. Eventually, there's going to be a massive reconstruction effort required to rebuild the Venezuelan economy. The estimates I heard when I was ambassador down there was it might cost as much as $30 billion. I think that the countries of the Americas, including Canada, could start to flesh out what that would look like. Once there's a democratic government in Venezuela, what would the reconstruction of the economy look like with the full participation of the international community?
How important is, I mean, we've been talking about the military and who they support. It's a similar conversation to the one we had nearly a month ago. How important is the military and their support right now, where their support lies, to advancing what appears from the outside looking in, and I know you know the situation much better, but it looks like a stalemate?
Yeah, so the military's ultimate decision is going to be extremely important. I do think it's worth noting that the military has been quite cohesive. It is not split into two different camps. There's no infighting within the military. When it switches, historically, and you look back at Venezuelan history, it switches in quite a unified way and quite quickly. Now, they are stuck between two different administrations, neither of which has full control of the country. What they're going to be looking for is which political leadership is actually going to be able to exercise effective authority over the nation and command the loyalty of the citizens of Venezuela. Maduro has clearly lost that. He may be still sitting in the presidential palace in Caracas, but what he says doesn't necessarily go in huge swaths of the population. And so that's not really an ideal situation for the armed forces. On the other hand, Guaido seems to have widespread public support. He just doesn't control key ministries. So they're kind of stuck between the two right now. And the task for Venezuelans is to continue to convince them that they back the National Assembly and they back Juan Guaido and that he should earn their loyalty.
Okay, I have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Mr. Rosewell. Appreciate your time again.
Anytime.